Hello, friends, and welcome to The View from Laura's Window, a podcast where life is explored through positive Christian thoughts. And when I say window, I'm referring to the view or perspective of life and how we think, act, and react. Everyone has a window, and yes, every window has a different view. But sometimes our view may not always be clear, and it may not always be focused. But I hope through this podcast and a positive Christian mindset, you will have a much better perspective. So open up your windows, open up your hearts and your thoughts to the view from Laura's perspective. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I am so glad that you are back today. Today is Tuesday, and I believe it is Tuesday's Talk Day. And today, on today's Tuesday Talk is Kelly Streiff. And she and her husband live in Atlanta, Georgia. And Kelly is a storyteller and a truth teller at her very core. And she loves to start fires or fuel the ones that are already there. Her messages are rooted in the Word of God, where she is able to shake her hardest struggles in a way that causes the listener to gain an even stronger sense of faith through their own struggles. Her hope is that her words will leave you in awe of God's glory, surrender to His story, and be comforted by His presence. And there was a time when Kelly herself needed this message, and she still does. So I want to go right into our interview and have Kelly share her story of finding hope in her life and in her hard seasons. So let's go right in to talk to Kelly. Hey, Kelly.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on today. I truly appreciate it.
Yes, I'm happy to be here.
And would you have had anything better to do now that we can't go out anyway?
Yeah, it's exactly right. Wide open these days.
I mean, you actually got me out of bed this morning, so thank you.
Whatever I can do, you know?
I had introduced you earlier on my podcast, but I was hoping that you could tell everybody just a little bit about yourself.
Yes. So my husband, Peter, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. We actually live in the city. A lot of people say they're from Atlanta, but we are in the city of Atlanta. And I work for a nonprofit that does orphan care in Southwest Kenya. We're called Oasis for Orphans. So I get to oversee a lot of the training for staff and for teams that come visit our site. We run care centers. We have 3 care centers in Southwest Kenya. So I do that, and then I'm busy writing and speaking and, getting to share part of our story these days.
So is it kind of like your nonprofit? What is that? Is that like CASA or?
It's called Oasis for Orphans, and it's a nonprofit that's focused in a particular area of Kenya where we help provide housing, food, education. We meet physical, mental, spiritual, social, emotional needs for kids who maybe have caregivers that some of their caregivers have died, and others they're just unable to take care of them. And so many of them come live with us, and others we actually keep in their homes, but we just give a little extra help so that they can get access to the education and basic needs that we can.
I'm sure that's a fulfilling job to do.
It is. It's really meaningful, and we get to see so much growth in the kids from the time they come into our program, and so that helps us see, when we're moving in the right direction.
Your podcast, I found you recently through Hope Writers.
Yes.
And I'm thankful for that. But your podcast is called Eevn If. And I'd never heard of such a title. I mean, I know I've said it before, even if, but when I heard that, I thought, what? I didn't understand what could her podcast possibly be about called Eevn If. And when I started listening to you, then I realized. I have a feeling those 2 words mean something to you. Do they have a personal meaning to you? Why did you call it Eevn If?
Yes. So many of us go through things in life that aren't what we would have expected or planned, or we oftentimes face obstacles where we're hoping that God will move in a certain way in our lives. And it's much like the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Daniel chapter 3, when they are facing the fiery furnace and the king is telling them he is going to throw them into this fire unless they will bow down and worship these idols that he created. And so they have this moment where they're facing the reality of the flames that are right there in front of them and what they believe God is going to do for them. And so they make this statement that we're all pretty familiar with now. They say, our God will deliver us from this fire. But then they go on to say, but even if he doesn't, we will not worship your gods or serve your idols. And so there's just this moment where they're able to so clearly declare their faith and their belief in what God is able to do. There's no question about his power. There's no question about, who he is and his abilities. But they also say, but our hope isn't just in what God can do for us. Our hope is in who he is. He doesn't deliver us from the we still won't bow down to any other idols. We still know he's good and he's the only one we'll worship. So that's become such an important story to me as we've faced some really hard things in our lives lately, where we've been able to say, no matter what, we resolve in our hearts who God is. And so whatever happens in our lives, that's not going to be questioned. We're not going to bow down. We will continue standing firm in what we believe and in what we know, even if life doesn't look like we've planned, or even if we find ourselves really disappointed, or even if we find ourselves really uncertain, really sad, we still know who God is.
I appreciate that, because right now there's a lot of people hurting right now. There's a lot of people that are questioning God. There's a lot of people that can turn that around and say, even if they just could see it for what it is. So that's very good. I appreciate that. I've heard it said that we are always in at least one of three seasons. We're in the middle of something, we're about to be in something, or we just got out of something. I thought that maybe we could focus a little bit on how all of us have that in common, because we all go through something hard. We all go through struggles, especially now with everything that's going on and the uncertainty that everybody has. It would be easy for people to question or blame God. Could you share a little bit of what you can tell people right now with that uncertainty that they may be feeling?
Yeah, I think that first of all, it's really important that we can acknowledge how we feel. And, sometimes in the Christian culture, we can get a little caught up in putting on the happy face and just pretending like things are fine, or I know I'm supposed to trust God, so I'm just going to stuff all these feelings down. And I do think there's something really important about acknowledging how we feel, acknowledging when we're scared, or acknowledging when we're sad, or when things feel uncertain or scary, or we're anxious, because that invites us into a deeper intimacy with God when we're honest with him about our thoughts and our feelings. But then I think it's important to remember that, the world right now, the world we live in, is not the world that was intended to be originally. Things aren't the way that they should be.
True.
And things aren't the way that they will be again one day. So when we acknowledge that, we can say, okay, this is not the way things were supposed to go. But we can have hope even here. And I think the reason that I find a lot of hope is I start to change my thoughts from what God has done to me and focus on what God has done for me. And a lot of times we are tempted to blame God. How could you let this happen? Why didn't you stop this? Couldn't you have done something? Were you not big enough or strong enough or powerful enough?
That's how, I get that way sometimes. I've never blamed God for anything. But I do question why are you letting this happen? Why did this happen to me? Why are you doing this? Like, why? I always ask why, but it seems like down the road, I figure it out later. I mean, God doesn't always tell me at that moment why, but later it all makes sense.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't make sense.
Right. I think a lot of times we do get that picture farther down the road where we can look back and say, okay, God, I see what you were doing. And I try to take those moments and tuck them in my back pocket so that the next time I'm facing something uncertain, I can go, you know what, I don't understand right now, but I didn't understand then either. And looking back, I have a different perspective. So that kind of gives me this fuel, even the next time I don't understand something. But I think it's also okay to say there are some things we won't ever understand here. And that's because, we're living in part of a bigger story than just ourselves. And that doesn't mean that God doesn't care about us personally and individually and uniquely, because I believe that he does. But we're also part of a huge story of redemption that God has been writing for years. And in that story, we see that God has a track record of pursuing his people, of rescuing his people, of redeeming his people, of restoring his people, of saving his people. And so I think that sometimes we have to train our minds to think through, this is who God has been throughout the course of history. This is who God has been throughout my own life. So even when I find myself, even if I find myself in a moment, in a season where I don't understand what he's doing, I can acknowledge my sadness, my grief, my uncertainty, my question, my fears, but then I can also point myself back to, but this is who God is. That is resolved and settled. I know in my heart who he is. So even if I don't understand, I'm still going to hold on to what I know in who he is.
That's good. That's really good. So I feel like I have to share this because your message, when I listen to you, it's brought a new perspective to my current season that I'm in right now. And last year was a very tough year for me. I went through a lot of physical and emotional and mental and spiritual and all kinds of emotions that I went through. And it caused me to go into, I would call a deep depression. And it's somewhere I've never been before. It was so unknown to me. But God's answering prayers and I'm doing better now. And, but I'm finding that a year ago, I was putting all of my words and emotions and thoughts on Facebook and I was sharing it. And you know how your memories come back on Facebook a year later? Well, all these memories are starting to come back and show up. And I was kind of not sure. I was torn whether I should delete those memories because they just seemed to kind of haunt me, or if I should leave them there to remind me of what I've gotten through. So the only reason that I bring that up is because I know you, knowing your story that I've listened to, and I know you and your husband have been through a tragic story, and you share it so deeply, and you share it in a way that it just gets to my heart. That's coming up, isn't it? Do you have a date coming up for that?
Yes. So a year ago, June 14th, so in just under 2 months from now, we'll hit June 14th. And last year on June 14th, my husband and I delivered our first child, a baby girl, full term, 9 months. We were actually a week past due date, but her heart stopped beating really unexpectedly the day before she was born. And we were completely caught off guard, but she was stillborn. And we did not see it coming. We had a pretty, unremarkable pregnancy, and we're just waiting for, waiting to go into labor, waiting to deliver her. And when we found out that her heart had stopped beating, then began the process of going into labor and delivering her. And that's where a lot of the part of my podcast even comes from, Eevn If, because those were the moments where we had to decide who we were going to be. And as we were waiting for her to be born, of course, when you hear that your child's heart has stopped beating while you're still pregnant, we understood the reality of that, but we also held on to a whole lot of hope that they were wrong. The doctors have been wrong, but that God would intervene and that God would, bring her heart to life again. And so that's where we held on to these words, Eevn If, because we had to decide right then who we were going to be. And we said, we are going to be people who believe that God is able to heal or resurrect Imogen, our daughter, we named her Imogen, that he's able to resurrect her, that he's able to put breath in her lungs and he's able to let her heart beat again. And we prayed for that and we believed for that and we asked for that and we asked other people to pray for us. But even in those moments, we said, God, you're able. We trust you. You do this. You're healer. You're still doing miracles. But even if you don't do this, we know who you are. And we know we want to be people whose hearts are fixed on you. And so we set our expectation on what we knew God could do, but we fixed our hearts on who he was no matter what. So her heart didn't stop beating, was born on June 14th, that anniversary coming up. And then we buried her in August. And then this past year, we've walked through a lot of grief and a lot of sadness and life that doesn't look like we had expected it to. We had planned to have a newborn and have a baby over this past year. And so that affects everything, not just, those initial moments, but that affects everything about this season of life, really from here on out. So hitting every milestone in the year. But we named her Imogen Dorothy, which means our daughter is a gift from God. And so we've held on to that even in this season. Dorothy was my grandmother's name. And we chose it really intentionally for her because we believed that God had given us a gift. And now we are able to say, as much as we desperately want her here, that is the story we would have chosen and that we would have written. She isn't, but we trust that she's still a gift that God has given us and that God is using her life, however short it was, to impact people far greater ways than we could even imagine. And so that's one of the reasons we're sharing her story, is because we want people to encounter God through her life and through her story and through the ways that we're sharing.
That had to have been just so hard at the same time that you're giving birth, that her life is gone. And how did you process all that? Did you go through any kind of depression?
It's hard because you're dealing with grief and loss and potential depression from that. You're also just going through postpartum things. And so the risk of postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety is still there. Your hormones have shifted and things. And so that's there, even though Imogen didn't come home with us. So I definitely went through really sad seasons, really dark seasons. I don't know for sure if I would say it was depression or if it was just kind of hormones or if it was just grief, but it was definitely hard and definitely dark and lonely. I made an appointment with a counselor, within days of getting home from the hospital because I wanted to have somebody to talk to and kind of help me look for signs of that.
Yes.
And that has definitely helped and made a big difference in having someone that I can talk to. And there were certainly moments where, I would say I had to learn how to live here on earth without her here. And there were moments where that didn't really seem possible. And there were moments when that certainly didn't seem like there could be any joy here on earth. And I think the Lord allowed me to feel the depth of my pain because it was a massive loss and it wasn't something to just gloss over. He definitely met me in my pain and brought a peace and a comfort that only he can bring. And that I
Did you feel it then at the moment? Did you feel God then?
No, a lot of times I didn't. And honestly, I would say, I wish I didn't have to know God in that way, if I'm honest. I wish I didn't have to know that comfort that comes in because there's an ache to the comfort. It's not just this sweet, fluffy pillows and rainbows comfort. There's an ache to it. And I wish I didn't have to know it. And yet at the same time, I'm glad that I do because I know a side of him and I know facets of his character that I didn't know before.
Has it changed you any for the good?
Absolutely.
Do you see a change in yourself because of all of this?
Yeah. And there are hard changes. There are some changes that are hard. There's a sense of innocence that's gone when you lose somebody that's so close to you in that way, or when you walk through something hard. There's an innocence and a naivety that's lost, but there are good changes too. And I think that I have a more eternal perspective than I've ever had before. I'm focused on heaven in a way, and not in a, what are we doing here on earth kind of way, but just in a, ultimately, I know heaven is what God has intended for us, and her life, Imogen's alive and well in heaven. Imogen's fine. She's fully healed and whole there. It's us here on earth that have to walk through the sadness in her. But I am definitely focused on what matters in life far more than I ever have been. I'm focused on into Jesus far more than I ever have been. I thought that I relied on him, and we all think that because we are doing it as much as we can until the season that we have to rely on him even more. So, I'm definitely even more relying on him. And
that has to give you it has to give you a feeling of peace when you say that she's okay.
Absolutely. And it took a while to get there because all of your motherly instincts, think that the safest place your child can be is with you. and in your arms of where you can take care of them and you can make sure their needs are met and you can make sure they know how much you love them. And, that's just kind of our natural instinct and our fleshly instinct. And that's how we're created, is that we can be the ones to provide for our children here on earth. So it took a while to accept and realize that she was being cared for even more than I could. She knew true ultimate love. She was in the presence of love. There was no question in her mind how loved she was by God and by us. So it took a while to get there, but now I do find so much comfort in knowing that we'll be reunited with her one day. This is the end.
Well, I have to say it's a sad and it is tragic, and I'm sorry that you went through all that, but I don't think you have any idea. Maybe you do, but you are coming into lives of women and families, and you're touching hearts. I hope you know that.
Thank you. That means so much. It means so much to me, but it also means so much because it allows us to see how her life and how her impact is outlasting her life. And
yes.
that, to a mother's heart is so beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that story. I know it's probably just as hard maybe as it was almost a year ago. I'm sure that pain is still there, but I can see it on your face, the love that you have for sharing the story. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
If there was one thing that you would want the listeners to remember about today, one takeaway, what do you think that would be?
I think that I want people to know that God is good and he's good to us. And no matter what we face, we can rely on his goodness. And that even when our circumstances tell us that he's not good, even when our circumstances tell us that, a good God wouldn't let this happen or would have intervened, that we don't have to give in to the hopelessness that produced, because he has a history, he has a track record, his character is good. And even what we can't see right now, you said it earlier, even what we can't see right now, he is working in our lives in ways that go far beyond what we can. The things that seem lost, stolen, heartbreaking right now, God is,
yes,
if not here on earth, then in heaven. And we have that confidence and that assurance.
That's a good message for people to hear. I'm glad that you said that. I appreciate that. Now, I know you speak. You have events that you speak at, but has that you're not doing that now, right? That can't happen right now?
I'm not doing too many in-person events. That is true.
Right.
I do have a few virtual things, so we're just
doing it
online. Yeah.
When will you be? So you already are on the virtual?
I do. I have an event in May and one in June. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Virtually. Yeah.
Definitely give me that. You'll have to email me all that information because I definitely want to get that out there. So where can everybody find you on social media or, like I said, your upcoming events?
So my podcast is the Eevn If podcast, and that's really anywhere you listen to podcasts. I am on social media at Kelly.Streiff, and the last name is tricky. It's Streif as in Frank, F as in Frank. I'll be spelling that one for her. So I'm there, and then my blog is kellystreiff.com.
Okay. Well, it's been a true blessing for me to have found you, and I'm so glad because I keep looking for the next episode to come up on your podcast. So I definitely want to get your word out there, and I want to share your message. And I truly appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to get to talk with you and get to share our story.
Hopefully you'll come back sometime.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Okay. Thanks. Bye. Well, this concludes today's Tuesday Talk, and I am so thankful I was able to bring Kelly on for her to share her important message. And if you want to hear her complete story, you can find her on all the places you listen to podcasts. Just look up Eevn If by Kelly Streiff, and it's Streiff. And you can also watch the video from our Zoom conversation over on my Facebook page called Laura's Podcasts. And thanks again for tuning in, and I hope you come back next week. And until next time, love you guys.